In this episode of No Place Like Home, we discuss some challenging topics surrounding perinatal mental health that some listeners may find distressing. We advise listener discretion and have provided links for resources and support services in our show notes. We hope you enjoy today's episode.
HG sufferers, we minimize our experience so much, it's ridiculous. It's like, oh, well, I wasn't as bad as that person. So,
Is that
I can't
also
complain.
because you're somewhat told by the system?
100%.
Yeah. Hi everyone and welcome back to No Place Like Home. I'm Jess. I'm here with Larissa.
Hello.
And the wonderful Yanika is back to share a little bit more about her story with us. So last time we got to the part where you were telling us about your second postpartum. So if anybody hasn't listened to Yanika's first episode, I highly recommend going and listening to it. Even if you have had your babies and you've not experienced hyperemesis yourself, just so that you can know what people are going through and how you can be a bit more supportive.
anyone.
There's so many people out there who are suffering that just don't have a voice, and I really think that episode will help people to understand quite how severe it can be. Your second time around, you planned for your postpartum.
I did. With you.
With me. I was your postpartum doula.
How did you come to be in contact with Jess? Because at that time, I imagine still postpartum doulas were not widely known.
Well, we're weirdly connected in a previous lifetime, but also through my work with Big Little Things. So I had amazing connections, and I remember seeing Mama Goodness was launching, and I did some postpartum giveaway or something to, I don't know, support the launch or something. But we just kept talking and being connected. And
you were vegan. Did you have my cookbooks as well?
I was
so there was that before.
I was a fan. Yes, I have, all of Jess's cookbooks. Yeah, so I knew Jess through other ways and different things, and, Melbourne being small in that aspect as well. But we really connected through that, through Big Little Things and what they were doing with Mama Goodness. But then we were talking about how she was stepping into postpartum doula and work, and I was like, oh, okay, I want to learn more about this, because I knew about doulas and I never really felt I needed one during birth. I had my private midwife and I was okay with that, but postpartum doula lit up something in me. I was like, I've learned that from my first one. I'm not doing that again. I want to do it right, or at least what I know is what I need in that moment.
Yeah.
And I think it was just lock it in kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was just like this is what I need. But I think we also talked about the difference that my postpartum would be because of HG. And I think that was something that we both kind of sort of learnt together, because I've obviously experienced it before, but I wanted it to be different. But as, because we talked my entire pregnancy, but as it got closer to our time together, the severity of it was very real. And I think it kind of not scared me, but it really was like, I'm going into postpartum, going to be really depleted, and I'm very scared of what that's going to look like for me, because I had, mental health issues as well coming out of the first one, but not to the degree that I had with the second. And because I reached such dark places with my second pregnancy, things that scared me, like intrusive thoughts, and which is so very common in HG pregnancies, to a very scary result. And so I wanted to make sure that I protected the space, and I wanted to be in and around bed. I wanted to lean into the rest, even though I'd been spending a whole lot of time in bed, but forced to, whereas this one I wanted to recover. It was all about recovering, because I knew that I wanted to, I guess, show others within the HG community that this is what you need, because it's not talked about enough. And one of the things I touched on in the last episode was that we get told over and over again that once the baby's born, once the placenta's out, it's gone. HG's gone. And yes, it is. And sometimes for some unfortunate people, it doesn't. Symptoms continue on into postpartum, but it isn't gone because the lasting effects of this suffering comes into your postpartum. You can't just switch
flick a switch in your body and go, I know how to consume food now and break it down. And
there's so much trauma. And it presents itself in so many random ways. Like it could be the smell of a cupboard that triggers your memory. It could be, for me, it was like a smell of a shampoo. It was like, it's just these weird things and I've spoken to so many survivors and we all have the same thing. It's just one or a couple of triggers, smell of food, taste of something. It just triggers this trauma reaction and it's PTSD because it is it's torture. It's 9 months of severe vomiting and nausea and it affects your mental health. So when you're coming out of that, how do you think you are going to feel? And it feels so obvious, but when you're in it and you feel like when you know it's over, it does feel like this amazing thing, but then reality hits and you're like, oh, wait, my body is like was shutting down. That's what it's doing.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew that I had to protect the postpartum. I had to make sure that I had the capacity of just not even having to think about food. And that was the main thing for me. I wanted to make sure that I was being fed and I didn't have to think about it. And that we had so many like back and forths about, okay, what can I eat?
Yeah, is this okay? Is that okay? Is this a trigger food?
Jess, had you worked with anyone who
No, this was all new to me as well. Yeah.
So the food would have been the huge component.
Yeah.
And I just didn't know. I said to Jess, like, I love your food, but there might be a day where it's really triggering or I just can't stomach it. And even though I don't have HG, it's this bodily reaction.
Yeah. You can't
so
control
strange.
it. Hey.
It's wild. And, I still don't really drink plain water. I don't drink tap water. I have to make sure it's like got something in it that doesn't remind me of what water tastes like. That's how bad it is, right? So so I got nourished and fed by Jess and it was such a healing experience because I didn't have to think about those things for like 6 weeks, I think it was. I could actually focus on, we talked about this, like we talked so much, but I just was able to focus on my mental health recovery. And that was just this bizarre, very real and confronting, but it was so nice, even though it wasn't nice. It's such a weird thing to think about. But
I know what you mean.
Yeah. And I was able to give space to the trauma and the PTSD that I had experienced and work towards what that living with that would look like and the healing process of that, which I'm still in almost 3 years later. And I think my work with Hyperemesis Australia and our podcast that we do, You, Me and HG, was such...
What a great name. I love
so
that.
clever.
It's, that was, has been some of the most rewarding work I've done because it's an interesting thing but we listen to other sufferers and survivors' stories. And even though we have this shared experience, it's healing to hear that there's other people that have experienced it. It's also rage-inducing because there's so many things that I'm just like, I can't believe that happened to you. Yeah. But it's this collective sort of, and when people listen to it, we get so many messages of people going, I really am so grateful to have heard this because you just don't feel alone anymore in it. Even when you're 10 years down the track, I've spoken to women that have, one and done because of their traumatic HG. And this is like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and they're still traumatized when they get gastro. Or if, I'm triggered by vomiting, if the kids are vomiting, I'm like, I can't handle it. My gag reflex is so, it's all these little things that affect you years down the track that we really need to acknowledge as like care systems and mental health systems and just within the community, HG community as well, because it affects way beyond the 9 months as well. And I think that's what keeps that fire going of wanting to make real change within our care systems, because we are failing every day, these women. And it's just, it's so severe. And the thing is, I am speaking from such privilege. Like, I am a white woman in Australia who has the means of having a private midwife and postpartum doula, and I know the privilege that I speak from. And the baseline of care, like, this is like a bag of fluid. We're just wanting that as a regular thing for every woman that experiences this, and the disparities between Indigenous and women of colour and just within our system is just shocking, and it's deeply concerning.
In terms of them receiving.
In the system.
Right.
And we're going down a very serious sort of line of
That's okay.
thinking, but, the suicide attempts of pregnant HG sufferers is staggering. Like, it's staggering. And also postpartum as well. And it's just,
Yeah. Heartbreaking.
It's so sad.
But
the system's failing these people.
Unless you're in it, like, I guarantee majority of us have had some intrusive thought during our pregnancy, which is just so scary, because we want this baby, we want to continue on, but it's just so hard. And I've spoken to so many different varying stories of IVF parents, and then they're experiencing HG, and you hate pregnancy but you wanted it so badly.
Yeah.
And then you go into postpartum and you're scared to go again but you really want to, and it's so wild. And I'm in this weird limbo of, I would love to have another baby, but I just know that if I am pregnant again it may kill me, like, genuinely. So it's like, it's all of this stuff, and it's just like, where do we turn to feel seen and heard, and where do we get support, and how do we support people? And like, I will listen to someone explain their experience while they're pregnant. I'm like, that's just red flags for HG. Like, did you get any support or anything like that? They're like, oh, I didn't think it was that bad. I was like, babe, yeah, like, it was. And I really wish we minimize our experiences always, regardless of what it is. We always minimize things. HG sufferers, we minimize our experience so much, it's ridiculous. It's like, oh, well, I wasn't as bad as that person, so,
Is that
I can't
also
complain.
because you're somewhat told by the system?
100%.
Yeah.
And, up until the late 80s, I could be wrong, maybe even I'd hate to think it was like the 90s, but in like up to the 80s, women were still hospitalized in psych wards when they had HG.
Oh my gosh.
Because they thought it was a mental thing, not a physical thing. You just don't want to be pregnant, or you just, whatever the excuse is. So this is like, it's such a traumatic thing for generations that are still around, right? So when we change the narrative around what it is, and the reason we continuously talk about it and wanting to push this knowledge into GPs, into the public system, is because more often than not, we're failing the women and the people that are suffering with HG at the very point where they need support.
Yeah.
And it's so baseline. Like, we're not asking for much. Like, it's to make sure that, I mean, even the medication is unattainable. Financially, HG just completely rocks families, because a little wafer was like $4 at one point. Like, or sometimes it was, I think someone said it was close to $8 at one point. And we need to take them at least, like, I don't know how many it was, like 3 or 4 times a day. So, and you need it for 9 months.
Yeah, wow.
Like, do the math. Like, some people just can't afford the care, like the baseline care that they need. So what does that affect? It affects their entire experience. And so what are we doing? And this is the work that we're trying to do with Hyperemesis Australia, which is completely volunteer based. It's, sufferers with our own trauma trying to help others going through it. And we have this amazing community and we have this amazing support available to everyone. But it really does stop at certain points because of the lack of awareness or what is available and the care plans that can be given to sufferers. So our big goals with Hyperemesis Australia is really just about getting into the hospitals and to the GPs and educating them and midwives to understand you just need to see and hear the HG sufferer. You need to acknowledge that you aren't going to help them in totality, right? It's about managing it. But just having someone validate your experience.
Yeah. Instead of telling you to eat some ginger.
Oh, yeah. Don't say that.
Ever.
Ever. And we laugh about it, but it's really important. The second I hear someone say that they've had this amazing obstetrician or midwife or nurse or whatever, I'm like, oh, did they have HG? And they're like, actually, yeah, they did. So it's like, so do we have to have people that have experienced it to actually give the care that they need? And that's scary because I don't want anyone to experience this, but there's only so much that we can describe to try and give you a glimpse into what it feels like.
Yeah.
Unless you've actually experienced it. And it's not like a us versus them thing, but it's really like unless you've experienced it, there is no way that you can quite understand.
Yeah.
But you can help. You can give just empathy and care and acknowledgement of what they're going through. Turn down the lights. Don't offer water. Give her something else. Like just make the experience softer for them because we are experiencing the just brutality of it is just disgusting. Like I was vomiting into my kitchen sink and wetting myself. Like it's not pretty. Like you feel disgusting and it's supposed to be this glowing, beautiful time.
I remember when I asked you if you wanted photos in your second pregnancy and you were like, absolutely not. And I was like, what about just like a close up of your belly? Your face doesn't have to be in it, but you just felt so awful that was just a hard no.
Yeah, I do regret not taking any kind of, I took photos, but they're all like
mirror selfies.
Me getting like fluids and like.
Oh, yeah.
But like I did take photos during my first pregnancy and I love looking at them, but it was a different headspace with the second.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so many are like that, which I really do relate to.
Are there statistics around how many women it affects?
So technically people say it's like 2% of people within Australia. However, it's so undiagnosed.
Yeah.
I push back on that. I think a lot more have experienced it. And the more I talk to survivors, I know that statistic is wrong because that's just diagnosed people, right?
Yeah. So that's the privileged people who are getting into the care with the right person. You could be privileged and still have a poor care provider who doesn't know about it. So it takes a unique set of circumstances to even be diagnosed, and that's 2%.
Exactly.
So imagine how big that statistic really is.
So much more. And I think also people think, oh, well, mine didn't last the entire pregnancy, so I mustn't have had it. Nope, you can still be classified as HG even if it lasts for 20 weeks and not 38. You still had HG. Right. That's 20 weeks or even if it's 13. Like if it's affecting your everyday and you're really struggling in any of those various points, as I said, it's a spectrum. You've had it and you should have got the care that you needed. And I think that's this disconnect, I think, within again, that minimizing of, it's not as bad as that. I didn't fracture my ribs, so I can't be that bad. Yeah. It's like, no.
You don't need to get
something we didn't talk about in the last episode, well, the first episode we recorded with you, is how, in pregnancy we're told to eat all these foods and take all these vitamins and it's like you can't even keep a sip of water down, let alone nourish your body and take your vitamins. I imagine there's an element of stress that comes with that, with that not being able to
first time round 100%, because I was like, oh, I'm not taking my vitamins. I'm not, and there's a particular one that really triggers HG that we always say stay clear of, but you just can't. And they might prescribe iron tablets. You cannot keep it down.
What are they thinking?
I know. And then you think, oh, but if I'm not taking them, I'm, neglecting my baby or whatever it is. And it's like, you just need to accept that your experience is not going to be like everyone else's. If you don't take those vitamins, it's okay.
Yeah.
You're not failing.
Yeah.
If you can have even like one chip or have a sip of frozen Coke, you are not failing. You're just getting by. It's just surviving. This is why we call them survivors.
Yeah.
And you're suffering. Like, it's really, we want to use the right language because you did survive something. Whether it's, there's a very high termination rate within HG sufferers, and the stigma around that is shocking. And I think we have a whole separate group, a private group, that we have HG sufferers that have gone through with a termination. And that is a very special group to us because they've got trauma deep than we can even imagine. And these are babies that they wanted. So it's really about like reframing how it affects. It's not just like, oh, they're vomiting and that's how it is. It's like, it's every aspect of your life.
It affects everything.
It's your other children.
Yeah.
If you have other children, it's your partner. It's your friends. It's your family.
Everything.
Yeah. Everyone's being affected by it.
When, Ali would play with my emesis bags and like she'd pretend to vomit, and that's her play. And I was just like, that's what she sees. And when we say, I don't really say remember when I was pregnant. I was like, remember when mummy was really sick, and she remembers it vividly, and she was 2. So it's like, it's generational.
I was just,
because this is the other thing, because Alia and Amara may have HG if they decide to have a family. There's a higher likely that they might. But what we're trying to do is help the next generation so that they're more empowered from the get-go, because the first time mums are going into it completely blindsided. But if we're having this conversation and you start seeing the signs and you know what HG is, you can be like, oh, I actually have heard of this. This might be what I've got.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
Yeah.
We don't want you to have to experience it the second, third, fourth time and go, I know better. Like, I want people to know from the get-go.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, so if anyone is listening to this podcast and is having those thoughts, either they know they have it or they're thinking, oh, okay, this feels very familiar because this is what I'm going through, what would be your advice to someone that was experiencing it now for their postpartum?
Yeah, because you mentioned earlier that you're really trying to get people to plan for their postpartum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you want to make sure that you're reaching out to us at Hyperemesis Australia. You'll probably talk to me, or I say this, I'm always available within my DMs and things like that. I talk to HG sufferers every day. You want to get the support during your pregnancy, but then we also want to think about the plan that you're putting in place for your recovery. So are you – and your recovery isn't just like the first 6 weeks. It's like the entirety of your motherhood journey, right? So when you're ready to seek out therapy, do that. It could be years down the track. That's okay. But it's really important. Be in our community within Hyperemesis Australia. We have our Facebook group that there's always conversations happening. I do know that it can be traumatic to re-enter a world or be surrounded by people that are suffering with it, which is a very hard thing to sort of admit because you wanted the support during your pregnancy, but it's really hard to be surrounded by something that brings you traumatic memories as well. But I think acknowledging that you will have PTSD, that it is a trauma that you've experienced, and I think and telling people around you that you want to recover. And I think figuring out what that looks like for you.
Yeah.
Is it staying in bed and recovering? Is it going out for a walk and whatever it might be? Having nutritious food, focusing on your rebuilding your nutrition stores is really important. Seeking out a naturopath, getting your gut health fixed. Like and this is not all at once, gradually when you're ready. And just don't put so much pressure on yourself to be fixed.
Snap back.
Yeah. Because it's just, I know it sounds so negative, but you're not going to. Like you've come through such a huge ordeal. Acknowledge that you just need time to recover from that, as well as birth and whatever postpartum brings, and make sure that you're very clear that you've experienced that with your care team. Don't just say, oh, I was vomiting during pregnancy. Be really clear that you had HG, even if you didn't get diagnosed. I really am big on if you just give it a name and then tell them just how much you need support with that, you hopefully will be taken more seriously. Yeah.
So sad that we're at that point.
Yeah, it is. It's so, I get such rage from it all, but I think we're trying to implement some of the work that we're doing with Hyperemesis Australia is we're going to be rolling out next year representatives in every state so that we can talk to health state departments.
Great.
We want this to be a federal thing, but we need education within the care systems because they're the front line, right? They're the ones that are seeing these people every single day, and that experience really resonates and affects their entire journey from pregnancy to postpartum. So we want to get them there. So the work that we're doing around that is so important. But we are such a small team. It's just, we're just volunteers and we're trying to juggle it all, and everything that we're doing is for the greater good. We're just small steps at a time. But having these conversations and having this platform is just so vital. And I'm so grateful because it means that someone has heard about it and going, oh, and the amount of times that I hear someone say, oh, I actually learned about HG through your experience. And one of my friends or my cousin or someone, I knew that she had it and I told her about it. And that's how we connect. And I was like, yes, awesome. This is what we can do. Yeah. This is the stuff that we can do. So talk about your experience as much as you can and share it and really make sure that we continue this conversation because it does actually save lives.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
Well, we will be sure to put all of the information available to everyone to click on and research and, approach you and the other volunteers doing some amazing work. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing.
Thank you.
We really appreciate you coming on today and sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This podcast represents the opinions of our hosts and their guest speakers. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and content here should not be taken as medical or professional advice. Please consult your healthcare professional for any personal recommendations and medical care. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate based on the best available information at the time of recording, we welcome any comments, suggestions or feedback via our website contact form, home.com.au/contact. Names and details of personal experiences may have been changed to allow for anonymity and privacy. To join the conversation, join us on social media at Home Postpartum.